those stories. But I tell you guys, when I first got started in the business, I heard that you had to make calls at 8 o'clock. Saturday morning, that was the time to do it, and everything was cool. I think I shared this story with some of you before. Everything was cool, with my wife until I actually left the bedroom. After a little after 7 o'clock, and she says to me, "You're not actually going to start calling people at 8 a.m., are you?" And I came down into this office that I'm sitting in now, and all I could hear was her voice. She's like, "That's people aren't going to want to talk to you." And I sat here for about an hour, unable to pick up the telephone. And I got to tell you, it was a big mistake because people like my father-in-law, for example, they're up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Their day is half over by 8, 9 o'clock, right? So there were plenty of people that wanted to have that conversation, but I let her get into my head as I was walking out of the room. And that was like my first dial session. So I've made all of the mistakes, I mean, and I never really enjoyed doing the dials, but like I said, man, that's the foundation in which, our weeks exist. So we got to make sure that we can continue to get on the phone. But that's all on the side of leads. And I think when we get to talking a little bit about the work that we get a chance to do, it's the end. It's the, like I said, it's not an either or when we have this conversation. We're the end, right? So, the lead. I always say the mortgage protection, right? Lead generated sales, is simplified issue sales is the foundation in which everything we do exists. And those really are the best lead sources for any of the things that we talk about, whether that's debt elimination, whether that's finding some money that, people have sitting aside, from an old 401k that we can move into, an annuity, or ultimately we're looking to help people grow their cash accounts, and we're talking IUL. Again, three-legged stools, going to be a common theme that we talk about here. And there's an opportunity to ask specific questions to help you guys find some additional business and make some additional funds. I was talking to another guy that I know in the business yesterday, and I have a lot of friends in the industry. And the cool thing is that, nobody tries to recruit you anymore, and you have some buddies, you just kind of bounce some ideas off of one another. And, they've made a push, where they are like last year, when they were doing this, they weren't really doing many referrals at all. Now they're to a point where, they're averaging 108 referrals a month. And it's just, a specific organization. So no different than Cornerstones. They're averaging, 108 referrals a month, and they're closing about 75% of those, referrals. So, again, I know it works. What we just have to do is we just have to, it's a set shift, and it's going to have to be something that we get committed to. When we start asking questions on all of our appointments, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for everybody to earn. But, talking about, IULs, and again, just we'll kind of repeat, what is an IUL policy, right? So, again, just, if you guys didn't take this down last week, an IUL policy is a type of permanent life insurance that ultimately provides, I guess you could say it combines the protection of a death benefit, but with the opportunity, obviously, to grow cash value that's tied to the upside performance of a market index, say like an S&P 500. But a lot of, the companies have different indexes that it can follow, and we ultimately look at that year to year. Unlike, investing directly in the market, the cash value benefits from the market gains, but it is, ultimately protected from losses due to market downturns. So think of it as you're participating in the upside of the market, but we, get to eliminate those downside risks. So when we look at some of the benefits for individuals, like just, because we have business owner opportunities as well. But when you think about, individuals, tax-free growth and income, right, is probably the number one benefit there, and I think that's probably one of the most compelling benefits of an IUL policy is its tax advantages, right? The cash value within the policy grows tax deferred, which basically means you won't pay taxes on the gains as long as they remain inside the policy. So it's all about being structured properly, and you can ultimately access that cash value through tax-free loans or withdrawals. Makes it a pretty powerful tool for supplemental retirement income, or funding, what I like to say are significant life events, using your own money, where you guys hear a lot of that stuff, on social media about, be your own bank, be your own banker. I mean, I don't like the terminology because we're not a bank, we're not bankers, but it is definitely a more efficient way that you can utilize, your money. Principal protection with, market participation, right? Again, just what we were just talking about. The IUL allows that cash value to grow based on the performance of an index such as the S&P 500, right? But with one critical difference. The principal is protected from market losses. Can't stress how important that is. When things were going bananas here at the beginning of the year, I didn't have to really concern myself with it. I mean, I'm paying attention to it, and it can be problematic in other areas of my life, but my retirement account, is not affected by, all those ups and downs hour to hour that we were dealing with there for a little bit, right? Because the principal is protected from market losses. In my world, it'll just level out, and then obviously we'll look for, those future good years, and it can regain during the market's upside. So, I just don't have to worry about any of the downturns wiping out my hard-earned money, right? I think that's a really key piece here. I like it with flexibility, for changing life needs. With an IUL, you can, adjust the premium payments and death benefits over time. I can kind of ensure that the policy continues to align with my financial goals. Whether that's securing the family's future, retirement, could be funding a child's education. We talk about, obviously supplemental retirement income. It's all of those, different areas where these policies can be used. Legacy planning, would be number four. For individuals that are concerned about leaving a legacy, the death benefit of an IUL provides tax-free wealth transfer to beneficiaries. This way, our loved ones receive meaningful financial cushion when they need it most, while bypassing the delays and costs associated with probate. Living benefits, for life's uncertainties, right? We talked a lot about this last week. Many IUL policies include living benefits, which allows you to access the death benefit early in the event of a chronic, critical, or terminal illness. So, you look at death benefit at its core, right? All of the living benefits, and then the ability to grow cash. It's a pretty awesome program. Benefits for people that are in business, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we've been doing here in recent years, with business owners, um, using it as key employee retention and executive benefits. So there are ways to utilize the IUL. You call it a golden handcuff strategy. Some of you may have heard of it, many of you maybe not, but it's a way to basically offer executives and key employees in a business a deferred compensation plan, or additional retirement benefits funded through the cash value of the policy. The benefits can be tied to performance milestones. The approach incentivizes loyalty while positioning your company as an employer of choice. So there's ways that the business can pay into this thing, and then they can start utilizing the cash value down the road to take care of their key employees. We have some partners, that 2.0 knows. We've been doing a lot of work with the Pantheon Group. Both, John Senior and John Junior have been in a training with those guys. Super, super bright guys. I mean, when we find the high net worth earners, we have, obviously some people that can help. So even as a specialist, I have specialists that I can work with, right? I don't claim to know it all, but there really isn't anything that we can't handle behind the scenes. I mean, that's what we've established in the retirement solutions division. So if you know anybody that grosses $1 million plus in their business, we're not worried about what their net take home is, and they have maybe a little bit of a concern about the tax liabilities that they have each year, which is all of them. We have an opportunity maybe to spend a little bit of time with them and show them how we can help reduce their annual tax liability while using those savings to help them accomplish some of the goals and even some of the risks that they have surrounding their business. So there's a lot of cool things that we can do there. Again, all you guys have to do is have a conversation. Know somebody that's in business, ask them if they're happy with the amount of taxes that they have to pay. If you could have them, spend 30 minutes talking with somebody that could help them, reduce their annual tax liability, I promise you they're going to want to listen, right? They're going to take that call. So tax advantage cash reserves for a business, right? So businesses often require liquid cash reserves for emergency or expansion. See, an IUL policy is great with the cash value that can serve as a tax advantage reserve, offering liquidity when they need it most. Policy loans available with the cash value are tax-free and can be repaid on flexible terms, right? So that's what's nice, or on their terms. They can pay back how they want. So that provides a nice safety net for anybody that's in business. Succession planning and buy-sell agreements, it's just a way to kind of protect partnerships, and then supplementing retirement for business owners. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I implemented that policy, when I was maybe only like, 10 minutes old into business, is that I had no retirement plan. I was doing a lot of, working like, straight commission positions in my career. We didn't have 401ks. I used to listen to my in-laws get on us about it. We had the restaurant, but, what's your plan for retirement, right? We didn't have one for a long time. And, the traditional, retirement plans like 401ks and things like that, again, we didn't have it. So we use the IUL policy to serve as our personal retirement strategy, which ultimately is going to provide that tax-free supplemental income during retirement while still protecting the family with a death benefit. So it kind of gave us everything we were looking for, as well as, some asset protection inside of that. So when we went through COVID, a lot of, businesses were scrambling, and we were one of them, right? Owning a restaurant during 2020 wasn't fun, and it wasn't so much fun in years to follow. But our biggest concern was our staff, right? The employees that we had working with us. We knew we were going to be okay. Why? Because we had significant cash value in the IUL. Now, we never had to touch it, but just letting you guys know that that was, something we knew we could lean on, if we needed money to get us through that difficult time. So the IUL is, a pretty powerful tool, when you're structuring it properly, and then, obviously the different things you consider using it, for later on in life. But I guess some of the questions, you guys look at like simple business owners. I mean, when we got started running a restaurant, right? I mean, you think of all these little businesses in the neighborhoods where you guys live. My grandfather, I remember when we were younger, he would drive out of his way to go to different places, like to go get gas. He would pass 5 or 6 gas stations to get to one, that was 20 minutes away. And I remember asking him, so why do you pass all of these gas stations, you know what I mean, to get to this one specific one? It was on Route 322 around my house here. And he said, because I know the man, we do business together, and I choose to do business with people that do business with me. Like he always felt that it was okay. Like, so, if he had, his cleaners or the places where he went to eat, what I mean, or you think about, where you get the car serviced, right? Any of these things, it's like if you're doing business with them, you should be comfortable enough to, to ask them to do business with you. But, how do you ask the questions? And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, we're all risk managers. That's what we do. And people ask me, what I do, I tell them I'm in risk management, and then I have my conversations that go along with it. But when you're talking to business owners, a lot of times we think that people have these things in place. And I'm here to tell you, they absolutely don't. Small business owners are so busy, running the day-to-day, operation, that they don't really consider this. It's in the back of their mind. They know they need to do something. But at the end of the day, they don't do anything. I could tell you guys now, there's a local tree company here, called Pro Tree. And, I've done some sponsorships, with a couple of golf outings, and these guys are always sponsoring as well. And I put a post on social media back, I guess, in like maybe October. And the next day, the guy gave me a phone call. And he said, hey, it was almost like you were talking to me. I know we need to do something. We're exposed to a lot of risk. We know it. We just don't know how to go about taking care of it. Come to find out, these guys are doing about $12 million a year. They're just hit their 10th year in business. They're doing $12 million a year cutting down trees. Unbelievable. I had no idea they were doing that well for themselves. But they had, there's two partners, and they have no plan in place. So if something, God forbid, were to happen to either one of them, on the way home from work, that business is in big trouble, right? So I asked one specific question to these guys, right? Because the one partner doesn't have any dealings with it. He's got his own business. He does something else with. He got Ed off and running, and he's really built it to what it is. But the one question that I asked him, I said, hey, listen, if you were to die today, would your business die with you? And I mean, there was some silence for a few minutes, and it would be problematic if something happened to Ed, right? I mean, he's running the show. Without him, that business is in trouble, right? And so without a proper plan in place, they're exposed to that potential risk, and they're in a pretty, it's a dangerous job that they do, and Ed's hands on. So, something that you guys can ask anybody that's in business, right? The other thing that we talked about, we were in that call. It's just they had some coverages, right? Some insurance, but I'm going to tell you guys, they really didn't have much. It wasn't set up, you know what I mean, as like, a buy-sell agreement to basically take care of the other partner if something happened to either one of them. I mean, they just didn't have anything set up properly. So like they asked the question, is your insurance advisor that, that some of these people tell you they already have it. They already have insurance, but most of these insurance advisors don't follow up. They're not building relationships the way I know Claudia does, or some of the other individuals that have been on this call for a while, Dave Hartman, guys that have, like been around a long time that really build relationships, right? Lisa, you know what I'm talking about with all of that. I mean, it's just doing the follow-up. Not a lot of agents do it. So they put the plan in place and they disappear. So asking the question, is your insurance advisor actively managing your portfolio? Right. So when you're having these conversations, it's not just, like I said, my grandfather, was a smart guy. I like how they did things back in the day, but it's one thing to say, all right, we're doing business with all these companies. They should do business with me. Well, how do I approach them? It's just by asking these simple questions, but you got to have the small talk. Have there been any changes in your life since you purchased the coverage? Right. In Ed's case, they had coverage like, from year one. They were barely surviving. They weren't even profitable. Now they're a $12 million a year company, right? It's crazy to think about how fast they've grown. That's a lot of businesses out there. And I got to tell you guys, I mean, the plan that I'm doing, so I mean, that was a little bit of a bigger case than I really wanted to be involved with, and I did involve the Pantheon guys. One of the cases is already done. It's yielded $120,000 target premium, right? So even with a 50-50 split with the guys I mentioned earlier, it's $60,000 commission for each of us. Well, we have the partner to work on. So we're just taking his application to get that in. The reason that we're not, basically done this yet, and it started back in November, is they spent $365,000 getting their equipment repaired, in the springtime here. And then together they had $650,000 due to the IRS. So they didn't want to take on almost $400,000 worth of insurance payments here, right now in the spring. So we're basically dragging it to August, September when they're cash flush and they're making an annual payment. And they're going to do that every year that time of year. So it kind of got things balanced out. So it's a little bit of a waiting game, but it's a lot of work that we were able to do. But the commissions on that are incredible. I mean, to get that one done, it'll be somewhere around $130,000 for each of us. So that's okay. It's okay to do a 50-50 split, right? I mean, that's a year inside of one case. So even if we just found a few of these a year, right, guys, you got to keep the main thing the main thing. But if you can uncover some of these opportunities and you do one or two of them a year, you're set. And again, those guys are doing the heavy lifting. I'm just running point. Another question that you can ask, right, and this goes back to what we were talking about with living benefits last year. Does your life insurance coverage provide benefits to you while you are still alive? Right? They used to say you got the old kind or the new kind. We got to get back to talking more about living benefits. They're extremely important. Because again, what happens if, when we put this plan in place, I always said, what happens if, Laurie's running the day to day? She's in there running that restaurant right now. What happens if she gets sick? What if she was diagnosed with cancer and couldn't go to, into work to run the business, right? So, that's what we had to take a look at. Like it's like, okay, well, we have managers in there could handle it. We got to pay them more to be in there, right? If they're going to be in there more, they're going to be getting paid more. So the bottom line is going to be affected either at that business or worse yet, here in this household. So one way or another, we're going to have to offset if something were to happen to her. I'm not saying we were going to lose the business if she got sick, but we would have been in trouble. So, making sure that we had those living benefits was, it's just one of those things that kind of puts your mind at ease. If anything happened, we had the ability to keep things moving forward. Got to look at the idea of living benefits for a business, not what happens if they die, right? That's like, as I like to say, a little bit of the unthinkable, but it's what happens if you get sick and don't die. Then what do you do then? So not only on a personal level, but like I said, for many people that are in business, that's a question that you have to look at. Finding out if people have been, asking questions about inheriting any money. I mean, some people have, had families, pass away and money left behind. You got to, ask that particular question. And one that I like to ask, to business owners, is your life insurance an asset or a liability on your balance sheet? Because there's a way to, really, like I said, make this money go to work for the business. There's just more efficient ways of, being able to take a look at that. But what we do is, a lot of this type of work, is going to be above a lot of your heads, right? And like I said, even some of it's above mine. But it's the book that we talked about, John, in the past, right? Who, not how. And I think that when we kind of kick off the year, I do this, a couple times throughout the year, but it's always like the beginning of a new year. You think about how you want to level up your business this year. And I think the big mistake that we all make, is thinking of what we have to go out there to do to make that happen. We have an opportunity to utilize the tools, right? The resources around you. You don't have to be everything to everybody. You just have to know how to ask certain questions and then be able to, find out who can help you do it. So you're going to be better served, with the teamwork to be able to grow your business than thinking you need to be the one going out there to do it all by yourself. And I've made that mistake. We don't have the time to do all the things in business we want to do, but if we surround ourselves with the right people, and we utilize other skill sets, we can all win together. That's the whole premise behind, who, not how. There's a pretty good story that kicks off in there about Michael Jordan. As great of a basketball player as he was, they weren't winning early. It wasn't until they got, Scottie Pippen and obviously some of the other, pieces there, but most importantly, Phil Jackson. He was the catalyst that made it all go. And, it was that team is what made them one of the greatest, basketball teams, I think probably during that time, maybe ever. Because they were winning championship after championship, but it was never going to be done by, Michael Jordan alone. And it tells that story in there, which I thought was pretty great. You guys have to have that mindset about the team you're on here. It's not about you going and learning how to do all of these things right now. It's about knowing how to ask certain questions and pass it along to somebody that, that can help you out. So, Another question, that I like, for people that are in business is when you send a check to the IRS, do they send you a dividend for the rest of your life? I mean, these questions are all designed to get their motor going a little bit. Turn it over to obviously to a specialist. But I'm going to tell you guys, the number one question that you can ask these small business owners is if you were to die today, would your business die with you? That will get somebody to stop in their tracks and tell you most of the time, yeah, it would. It would die, it would die with me. Because I know if something happened to my wife, if she were to pass away today, business is probably going to go with her. I mean, we have plans in place, but I don't want to go in there and do that job. It's just not, I don't want to do it. So, we have plans to make sure that everybody's taken care of, but it's just, that's the idea behind all the small business owners out there. I mean, they have to be hands-on to make it all go. And a lot of the products that we offer specifically in IUL can really help with some of the things. I like to say the risks that they're currently exposed to. Don't know if we have any questions here, Rob. Karate Kid Part 5. That roundhouse now would be looking pretty ugly. I can tell you that, man. But I've grown in size, so people leave me alone. I guess that's the benefit of being a bigger dude. But I don't know. I don't have too many problems these days. On a 50-50 split, I mean, that's kind of what happens on that 50-50 split. And like I said, it is just having the courage to have the conversation. I'll have to pull that Facebook post. You guys can post it yourselves. I mean, I had two people basically respond to that, and I'll text it over to you, John, and you can get it out, or I'll even post it in the group. It was a simple deal. All I did was take a couple pieces of information from some of the literature that those guys gave me, and it attracted two guys to give me a call. One was obviously the tree guys. The other was a buddy of mine who owns a pretty successful restaurant to the tune of 15 million a year. Italian restaurant, catering, to go. It's a lot of Italian food, but I knew they were successful. Had no idea they were doing that well. Own a lot of real estate, and it's three siblings, two brothers and a sister, and they kind of do everything together, including real estate. They've got about $8 million worth of real estate. Again, known this guy since grade school, knew he does well, go to his restaurant a lot. Had no idea he was doing as well as he was doing. But again, they're exposed to a lot of risks. Challenge with those guys, there's been some health stuff, but we're getting through it. I mean, we're getting them approved. So, just wanted you guys to know a little bit about, what you can do with the IUL, the way it works for individuals like us. I mean, hey, look, we're all independent. We don't have 401ks here. Don't really want one, so, IUL for yourselves when you get going here is a great way to kind of help yourself plan for down the road, as a supplemental retirement piece to go along with some of the other things that you guys have. But I don't know, we got about 5 minutes, John. I don't know if you guys have any questions about anything. If Patrick wants to add anything in if he's on here. What do you guys got?
I think Lisa had a question. I don't know if she was able to
Hmm.
unmute, but Lisa, if you can put it in the chat, or if you want to put your question in the chat, that works too.
Yeah, we could do that. While she's putting a question in the chat, hey, I wanted to just give a shout out, John. I talked to Melissa Peterson this week. We had an opportunity to look at a debt free for life case for herself. So it was cool that she had the courage to have that conversation, kind of put her debts out there. Where obviously it stays between her and I, and we got a chance to see what the program can do. What she's looking at now is just trying to decide exactly what she can put into it. But the program is going to save her, about 7.5 years off of her debt load, quite a bit in interest as a result, and kind of give her that cash account that she could use for future spend. So, wanted to obviously, again, that's what we're asking. Just take a look. But you could probably ask her idea of what debt elimination was all about prior to that conversation. So we know what it's going to do for her personal, finances, but what it did
Right.
for her mentally, you know what I mean, as far as being a referring agent here, she now has a much better understanding, as to what the program's all about and can refer it, I think, a little more confidently moving forward.
I'd
I
love it. JK too, if you can unmute Melissa, I'd love for Melissa to share quickly her thoughts on that. Like what, because we all have an idea of the debt elimination, but from her actually going through it, what did it change in her thought process?
Absolutely. Before I bring Melissa on, Lisa, we do have two questions. One's from Lisa. So, Joe, basically, what it is, if they do say that the business would die with them with the business owner, how do we like get them to you?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the best way to handle that, Lisa, right? I mean, even though you probably could have some of the conversation, I think the easiest way is to, this is where we do joint work and kind of work together on these things. What I would do in that, that conversation there, it's like, like what we do when you're in the house. It's just like, I'm a mortgage protection specialist, or, you don't have to say that to a business owner. I specialize in some other areas in the industry, but we have, individuals that specialize in working with small business owners just like yourself. In fact, Joe is one. Not only is he in insurance, but he has, business interests outside the industry. So he's a great guy to talk to because, he's been in the same boat that you're in. So right now you're currently exposed to some risks. Would you like to spend maybe 30 minutes just to see how, you could benefit for some of our programs, right? I mean, however you want to word that, but I would use, a business specialist, however you guys want to position it. You guys come up with your own language on that. However you want to, position the specialist. But like I said, you know, small business owner. I mean, look, you could refer to Patrick DiLorenzo. He's a small business owner as well, in insurance, right? So, I mean, not only do we have the, an insurance business here, right? We happen to have a restaurant and, partner in a drug and alcohol facility out in Ohio. So, I mean, there are things that, my wife and I are involved in, kind of like what John was talking about earlier. I've used some of the successes that I've had in this business to, invest into some business interest outside of insurance. And so it's like you talked about earlier, you'd be able to yield the dividends, from some of those opportunities. I've tried to, emulate not only Barry, but some other, mentors that I've had in life, where, just being smart with my money. I can tell you guys it wasn't always that way. I was pretty foolish with my money in my 20s, but as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm just trying to make better decisions around it. But I got to tell you guys, a lot of it has started with the cash building policies that we've been talking about the last few weeks, and then just some of the successes that I've had in the business along the way, just reallocating those dollars into other things. And you all have an opportunity to do that as well. So just, position them that way, Lisa. I mean, it's like, you got somebody that's in business, owns small businesses. They were exposed to certain risks. You have a conversation to learn how, the products can help you, eliminate those risks, but also, help them use their money more efficiently is what I like to say. Um, and if you guys are dealing with somebody that's, obviously a decent sized business where, they're like grossing, the business grosses more than $1 million a year, you ask a simple question. If I could introduce you to somebody that could help you potentially reduce your annual tax liability, you'll be open to a 30-minute call to learn how you can do that. Everybody wants to be able to lower taxes. I mean, we may be a world divided, right, guys? They try to divide us in a lot of ways, depending on what you pay attention to. But I can promise you this: each and every one of us dislikes the IRS and paying taxes, right? We can all agree on that, if nothing else. So I promise you, they want to have a talk on how they can lower their taxation.
Absolutely. Joe, before we get to Melissa, before we wrap up, Sturgis asks, are you going to be doing the new debt to capital?
Yeah, I actually have a meeting on that in an hour, to kind of learn how some things are going to go with that. But the whole idea behind the debt free for life, and I don't know that between all of us, I don't know if I like the name debt to capital better than I like debt free for life. I think that's a little bit more powerful, but it's not my program at the end of the day, right? It's just, something that, we have a vendor partner, and that's the Smart Advisor Group out of Pittsburgh. But I can tell you guys, it's going to be a pretty robust program. It's going to do a lot of different things. And I guess, that name lends a better hand to what it's going to be able to do. The debt elimination piece, like I said, all the work that I've done to date, nothing changes. The software will still, alert everybody when it's time to pay debt. So it's still going to do all of the things that, we know it can do. It's just going to have a lot of other features that, will make the conversation more exciting. And again, it's working with GBU that has a instant decision product. So that's pretty cool. Instant approvals. You guys have seen Patrick post that in a lot of his, messaging here, throughout the last like 2 weeks, instant approval. Guys, that's a big deal because when we first started this process, it was taking 6 to 8 weeks to get done. I mean, we were losing a lot of agents as a result, probably lost a lot of clients because agents weren't good enough to take them through the process. So there's a lot of people that, that just never ended up getting anything done because of how long it was taken. But that was the whole life industry when we first came over here to it. Now, a couple of years later, we've got instant decision whole life products. It's pretty incredible stuff. So for all of us, it's like it's getting done instantly. You know what I mean? Then it's just a matter of getting that premium payment, from the client, over the next couple of weeks. But you guys are getting paid a lot faster, as a result of that. Fast pay makes fast friends.
Absolutely. I don't know if Melissa's able to unmute. There she is.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to throw you on the spot, Melissa, but I mean, definitely we had a good conversation about it the other
It's,
day. I asked her what the takeaway was, like on the program and her, it was pretty cool insight, just had a lot more understanding as to, what we've been talking about the last bunch of weeks. But I'll let
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. You're not putting me on the spot. It actually really opened my eyes to how much money is
well, I think we lost you there, Melissa.
Is Melissa still on? Did she freeze up?
yeah,
Perhaps.
I think so.
Melissa?
ways. Be sure I'll do
Yeah.
it. So I just gotta kind of figure out the amount that.
Yeah, it's good.
Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Melissa.
Hey, Melissa?
Yep.
Hey, you froze up. We didn't hear anything you said. So maybe backtrack and quickly just tell us what changed in your thought process from your idea of debt elimination to what actually you would be referring your clients to now that you've gone through it yourself.
Now that I've gone through it myself, uh, it's quite a bit different than the traditional debt consolidations because they don't cancel your credit cards and put a freeze on your credit cards and all that kind of stuff. It's not as invasive, but it keeps track of everything for you. You pay into it a certain amount, and it actually it's a great idea. I really like it. I like the concept of it. It showed me how much money I'm wasting on interest with credit cards, and I would recommend it to anybody. And now I've got a deeper understanding of how it actually works. It sends you reminders, when you need to pay your cards, and it keeps track of everything for you. It's a simply a great plan. I really like it. And the way you presented it was really in depth, and I really appreciate that because I mean, I kind of knew nothing about it going into it, and you explained it very well in detail. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Melissa, based on that, do you have more of a passion now to make sure that you refer people to go through that process now that you've gone through it?
Absolutely, because now I know that they're not going to take charge of, people are probably a little leery of, having to cancel their credit cards and all that kind of stuff like the traditional places do. And this just kind of gives you the freedom, and it creates a savings account for you for later so you don't get yourself back into the mess once you pay it all off. It's a great concept. I love it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah. I encourage everybody to, to kind of, like I said, take a look at it. Whether you do the program or not, you're going to go through the presentation. It's not wasting my time. It's what I do. You know what I mean? But you might see something for yourself that, that ultimately puts you guys in a better spot. And I'd love to help. Like I said, don't be worried about talking about your debt because like I said, I told Melissa, it's everybody like is a little uncomfortable with that, but at the end of the day we all got it going on. So some a little more than others, but it is what it is. We're all pretty much in the same boat, but if we could show you a way how to get out of that in a third of the time or less, utilizing the program, it's you have to agree it's worth a look. But I kind of showed Melissa, I think what she was able to take away is that it's not a sales pitch, and I think that's sometimes what people think. I'm going to get referred over to Joe or Patrick. I'm going to have somebody, pitch me another insurance product. At the end of the day, we're just kind of walking them through how it works. Our presentation is really designed to just simply show them how it works. I guess what they do with that information is up to them, but it does a pretty good job of showing them, reallocating dollars that are already part of budget to accomplish the goal maybe a little bit quicker because they're going to be a little more consistent. But then obviously to help them, save a little more efficiently, keeping them debt free, right? Using those funds down the road where they're the ones earning interest versus borrowing and paying it. I hate to use the term no brainer, but that's what happens when a lot of people get a chance to see this thing. So, but yeah, happy birthday, Alvin. Everybody's giving you the happy birthday love here.
Joe, it's amazing when we dive into so many aspects that we represent the middle income America, whether it's living benefit life insurance, tax advantage retirement through IULs, protecting retirement dollars, your safe retirement dollars via fixed annuities, debt elimination. You know, when you dive into these things and you realize that what you're actually bringing to middle income America is value. It's value, not gimmicks. And you can't but create more passion and more boldness with who you are in the marketplace when you truly understand these things. Because there's a lot of people out there, Joe, they've not gotten to that point yet. They still kind of wonder, you know, like it's like I was watching a commercial over the weekend about Colonial Penn. And I was like, you know what? And I don't know how to record it and be able to play it on GroupMe, but because it seems like I can't really post a video more than 30 seconds. But it was like, okay, listen to this commercial. It was these two middle income America ladies talking about life insurance, and they were sisters, and the one sister said, life insurance with our family's history. And then her sister said, yes, have you not heard of Colonial Penn? It's guaranteed issue, and they make this all sound like it's the most wonderful life insurance on the planet, and it's a freaking guaranteed issue. It's a 2-year wait, paying astronomical rates for otherwise what looked to be a healthy lady who simply thought she couldn't get life insurance because of her freaking family history. And that's the exact person that we get on the phone who says, oh, I've already got it taken care of. And we're not bold enough to say, whoa, and figure out a way to be kind with being bold and just say, let's make sure of that. Do you have a UL you put in place that you didn't properly fund? You think you've got permanent coverage, but now you're starting to get notices that your premium's going up. Red flag. Anyway, I could go on with that, Joe.
Well, you're right. There are a lot of gimmicks out there, but I'll leave everybody with this. What we do is really, really important. And I don't know. I always say this: the business went from my head to my heart when I had to deliver that first, death benefit check. Because when I was with American General Life and Accident, we actually took the check to the client, and I could tell you that's some pretty emotional stuff. You can't bring back the loved one, but knowing that the family didn't have to leave the home, like financially they were going to be okay because, they had a conversation with me. I mean, like I said, the business went from my head to my heart, and, I kind of became a lifer, in those early moments. And unfortunately I had to deliver 2 of those checks in my first, couple of years in business, which, I mean, some have never delivered one, but I'll leave you guys with this. I'm sitting on the beach on Sunday, right? First day we could actually get on. It was a little bit of a cool weekend up here. It wasn't much of a beach weather until Sunday. It was nice. We're playing a wiffle ball game, our side of the street versus the other side of the street. And people are leaving the beach. I actually had a conversation with the guy. Hey, beautiful weather, have a good day, that kind of thing, right? We're in between innings having a conversation as a husband, a wife, a daughter, and little grandkid was about 7 years old. So we were literally just talking to this family. They get a little bit further past us, and the woman drops in the sand. My daughter says, "Oh my God, Dad, that lady just passed out." So everybody goes rushing over. Happened to be a beach, somebody coming by, the beach patrol. They went over there. They were giving that woman CPR within 30 seconds of her falling. Anyway, long story short, she had a pulse when she left, but she didn't make it. And I said, how could I be talking to a lady in one second she seemed fine? And literally like 30 seconds later, she's basically died on the beach. Now, I don't know what kind of plan they had. I remember going back, sitting in my chair thinking, damn, that's just how, fragile life truly is. You know what I mean? And everybody's, heard some of these kinds of stories, but to see it, you know what I mean? When somebody's just on vacation, hanging with their family, and the poor little boy, that it was a crazy mess. Every emergency, member in the area was on the beach trying to save this lady's life, and they were unsuccessful. But just like that, she's gone. And I'm thinking, I don't know what kind of plan those people had, but it's just why what the work that we do is so important. Even if people don't think they need it, it's not until they're in that particular situation. Whatever's going on this week with that family, again, you only hope that they had a good solid plan in place because she's no longer with us. So, it was wild to see that, and it's kind of something that's kind of it's kind of stayed with me all week here, but it's just leaves me with that thought of, the work we do is important. We got to get out of our own way and just be willing to have the conversations, because everything we do hinges on having the courage to have conversations with people about what we do. Can't be a secret agent. So if you guys can get out there and have that conversation, you can make sure that there's a plan in place, because, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It eventually happens to all of us. That's just the way that lady, her time was up, you know what I mean? But that was something else. So just take that with you, as you guys go to get on the phone. Those are the kinds of things. That's like the karate, right? Like that's what makes you dial the phone, is because people have needs and we have the solution. We got to make the introduction. So with that, guys, I hope everybody has a good rest of the week here, and I'll look forward to seeing everybody back here next week.
Thank you, Joe. God bless.